C-D-E-F-G, gummy bears are chasing me. The relentless
pursuit
of whatever
works
in the life of a child.
Welcome to Fostering Futures with CAHELP, a podcast dedicated to our relentless pursuit of whatever works in the life of a child. I'm your host, Athena Cordero, inviting you to join me and countless others as we share our unique perspectives and expertise in the world of special education, behavioral health, social-emotional well-being, and community. Follow us on Buzzsprout, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Welcome, everyone, to Fostering Futures. I'm Athena Cordero, and today I get to talk to Mark Todhunter. And we're going to continue the discussion on our foster series, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about mental health. So welcome, Mark. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you, Athena. I was glad to be here.
Good. So, of course, let's first just start off. Let's tell everybody a little bit about you. Okay. So why don't you tell us what your role is here with CAHELP and what you get to do with the Desert Mountain Children's Center?
Well, my role here currently with Desert Mountain Children's says I'm Behavioral Health Counselor Supervisor. And so basically what that means is, I work with staff, clinicians mainly. I supervise interns and licensed folks and kind of as we carry caseloads and impact children. And I've been with CAHELP, and it's changed its names over the year, but been here going on 24 years. And so I started with...
You've seen it quite a bit.
I've seen quite a bit. Yes, a lot of bit. And
A lot of it into quite a bit.
bit, yeah. And before that, I cut my teeth into, so I've been working with kids probably for about 35 years, and I cut my teeth getting into my career and work with foster children. I worked with a foster family agency as a social worker when I first started out, moved up supervisor. I was a director for Child Help USA over their foster care programs for about 4 years here in Southern California and in Tennessee. And so after that, I came over here and started working with children here at Desert Mountain Children's Center.
Okay, so it sounds like you've seen maybe some trends, some patterns, things change over the years to where we are today. And I think that is the perfect place for us to pick up, our discussion and what we're going to get into today. So I kind of want to go back to what one of our other guests spoke about. She mentioned how identity is affected for our foster youth. And so what do you think? How does foster care impact a young person's sense of identity?
I think one of the biggest things that impact foster youth or children in general that have a lot of changes. When you think about a child that gets removed from a home, right? So they've lost everything. They've lost their familiarity with their home. They've lost their primary caregivers. Even as chaotic as it may be in the home, it's still a loss for them. If they're school age, they get pulled out of their school, the familiarity with that. They lose their friends, they lose their pets, and they lose most of their clothes and their belongings, and they usually leave a home, unfortunately, with a trash bag with clothes that they can grab on their way out. And one of the things that, if you could only imagine if we're here at work and somebody shows up and they say, "You're coming with us," and you don't know where you're going, you don't know who you're going to be with, you don't really have any control, you're just going, and you know that the people that supported you now are involved with law enforcement, and you're driving away with almost nothing, right? You've lost all your friends at work, you can't talk to your family, your extended family, and you go into a strange home where you don't know the people that are there. You may not even recognize anything that they do, and the house may seem so strange. And here you are people that are wanting to care for you, but internally, all those changes are impacting you in a way that you just don't have the capacity mentally to understand really what's going on.
It's so I haven't heard anybody describe it quite like that before, and, I appreciate the example because I'm hearing that it impacts the identity of, a child, but it sounds like a grief and loss process that I don't think we really tapped into that much in our conversations before. But that is what it sounds like. And from what I know, what little I know about grief and loss, there are stages to that. So trying to get accustomed to a new home, even when someone wants to do something nice for you, has to be difficult, compounded by all of those things.
Well, and if you look at both sides of the coin, right, absolutely, there's grief and loss. Just being removed alone is traumatic for a kid, right?
Yeah.
There's trauma. Just what I described as trauma. It would be traumatic for any of us to be able to go into those situations. And when you go in, you don't know if and when you're going back, or if you're going to be able to see your parents, or how often you're going to see your parents. You get put into a new school, different school, new kids, new teacher, new routine, and you're just trying to make the adjustments and get your feet underneath you, and not knowing where you were, where your identity was back in your previous home, and now everything's changing, right? So you deal with just who am I? Where do I belong? And then you're dealing with labels like foster kid, and I'm a dependent, and now I'm high risk. What does that mean? Kid goes into school, now I'm high risk. You get tested for an IEP,
Yeah.
trauma impact, and also what you brought up is the grief and loss. So, right. So that is an ongoing thing that they're going through with grief and loss. It's a continuous process of being able to not ever knowing what's going on. There's no finality to it, especially initially. And then if kids have been in the system for years, right, it's just never really able to get a footing on what healing is and what change is and where do I belong.
That's heavy. I imagine it affects their sense of safety, and stability, especially you mentioned the IEP process, right? Which is an individual education plan. Is that an automatic thing, for a kid that's put in foster care that they have to now go through this process to be assessed for an IEP, or what does that look like?
No, it's not typically a automatic thing. Oftentimes, though, there's so much disruption going on in their life, and internally, there'll be behavioral issues, there'll be emotional issues. And sometimes when kids are having a hard time adjusting or being able to regulate themselves as they get identified in the school system, and will oftentimes be recommended for an IEP, an individual education plan, to be able to put in helps and interventions to be able to help stabilize that kid so they can take advantage of whatever's their schooling,
Yeah.
and being able to get ahead educationally.
I asked because in a different conversation, someone asked me, what if a foster family, takes in a kiddo that needs special education services, but they've never been tested? And they realize, in this whole new situation that maybe this child does need some support. What is that? Does that, push that sense of safety or stability even further for a kid? Because now it feels like you're telling me I have a problem, but it's only because I'm here with you, right?
Yeah, and it comes back to what you were just asking about with identity. Is now kids dealing with these new labels and what's going on and who am I, and am I worthy? Am I worthy of love? Why are people not working hard to get me back with my family? And the kid, and even if they are, the kid doesn't understand that he's not why he's not going back, and doesn't oftentimes know what's happening on the other side through the court systems
Right.
with who their original caregivers are. And so for a kid, oftentimes we talk about a kid feeling grounded, especially emotionally, right? And that really refers to, um, you know, maybe a kid or an individual that feels like, okay, this is my place. This is who I am. I have kind of some sense of control of my environment, right? That's what we would, kind of identify as being grounded.
Okay.
Well, but for a kid that's going through these changes and where do I belong and how do I fit in and what is the new rules, what are the unspoken rules, is that they're floating through space, right? They're this kind of moving through and they really don't understand where to grab on, where to hang on, where to land. And so oftentimes that comes out as behavioral issues, emotional issues, tantrums, meltdowns, and then being able to control that and not really having the skills or the vocabulary to be able to communicate in a different way other than behavior or emotional outbursts.
So, I mean, I would imagine with all you just described for a kiddo, it would be completely natural to have some behavioral things pop up, right?
Absolutely.
Differences in mood, attitude, personality, even, which usually your mood and your attitude are temporary. Your personality is more set in stone. But I could imagine that all of that, even talking about grief and loss, affects you in a way that you don't act like, quote unquote, yourself. When that happens, when the adults around this child notice that, what are some of the services or supports maybe, behaviorally that might get put into place? Like, say I'm now withdrawn and I used to be, more talkative and outgoing, and now my foster parents are seeing that I'm not speaking at all, and they question, a social worker, like, she doesn't talk. What happens next? Like, what would somebody come to me and suggest or try to support me with?
Well, and a lot of times, the social workers do the best they can. So oftentimes the county worker comes and they're managing placements and moving kids and trying to find safe places for kids, right? That's the goal, not always interpreted that way by the child. So that's the original kind of intervention that happens when a child is removed from a home.
Okay.
And then from there, they're typically being assessed. They get referred. So what we do here at Desert Mountain Children's Center is we have clinicians that go into the schools. Kids will get referred for our services. We'll do assessments, and then we'll provide counseling interventions for them on a regular basis. It could be once a week. It could be more if needed. It could be twice a month. It could be once a month if we just need to kind of touch in and see how they're doing. There's also other kind of auxiliary type services around, like ABA therapy, which is applied behavioral analysis, where you come in and you have social workers or interventionists that come in and work with the child, work with the family, and try to help develop skills for that child to be able to cope.
Gotcha.
Is that kind of what you were asking?
It is. It is because what I'm hearing and how you're describing it, I'm just thinking about all the other things that can come about that we don't typically think about, just that might seem small to foster parent or social worker, but is actually a huge difference in a kid's personality, or their mood because of what's going on. But it is good to know that there are services available and that we've got clinicians who are spending time with our foster kiddos to kind of identify some of those things and offer them some supports.
Absolutely.
So let's talk more about the role of adults with our foster kids. What's the importance of that? How deep does that go, or what's the effect or the impact? What role do consistent caring adults play in supporting the mental health, even outside of what you were mentioning, right? I mean, that was a very structured kind of process, assessment, counseling, but outside of that, even just adults around the kiddo, how does that impact?
I think one of the things over the years that I've noticed with foster parents is that it's a process for them even getting into foster care. And when I was working with the foster family agencies and working with couples or singles that were coming in and wanting to be foster parents, right? Because they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to really insert themselves and do some of that heavy lifting. A lot of times not really fully understanding what that means or what they're sometimes getting into.
Yeah.
And so as they go through the training process and they begin to realize, okay, this is a special and unique position that I'm signing up for to impact a child. I think the biggest thing that can happen that's going to have the most impact is if, just kind of like what we were talking about now, is if the parents begin to understand what the foster child is going through. This is a different situation. This is not like raising your own kids, because your own kids haven't gone through, hopefully, through the trauma of what a foster child goes through and the whole process, but really being able to understand that and continue to learn different skills. It's a different, taking parenting classes or different type of clinics that will help you understand what the child is going through so that you can change your own style. It's a different type of parenting and it requires a different type of skill.
Yeah.
One of the things that really impacts it for caring adults is one of the biggest things is just consistency.
Okay.
There's so much change that's happening for this child anyway, and they begin to lose their trust. They begin to understand in their own life that this person may say they care about me, but they're not going to be around any longer than the last two social workers or the last two foster parents. And so then as children get more into, they're in foster care for longer periods of time. And if they happen to have several moves, different placements, and it becomes to the point where they just emotionally are unable to attach.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having a piece of masking tape. And you take a piece of masking tape and you put it on your jeans one time and it sticks pretty good. And you pull it off of there. And then you take it and you put it on your jeans again. Doesn't quite stick as well. It may hang on a little bit. But by the third and fourth time, the masking tape is like, I've already done this. I've already had my trauma, and I'm just not going to put myself out there. Yeah. And so when a truly ideal foster parent understands that and understands that this kid may already not trust enough to be able to attach, they've been hurt so much because of loss and grief, is that it just is going to take time.
So I can see very clearly how that would make a difference, just being consistent. But can you give me some examples? I mean, I could tell somebody, just be consistent, but what does that really mean? What does that really look like? Because I'm imagining, a kiddo coming home from school, and I always ask, what was the best part of your day, or what happened, or what was the worst part, like a high and a low all the time.
Right.
Talk to me about it. I could imagine having some kind of ritual thing, in the morning that we do before I send them off. But is that what you mean by consistent, or what? Or is it deeper than that?
I think it really is about who you are as a foster parent. And I think one of the most important areas to be consistent is your demeanor.
Okay.
It's like, you have to understand, when you understand what a child is going through, and when you understand that behavior and outbursts are really about a form of communication that this kid is just kind of purging out from deep inside him sometimes and doesn't able to express himself, is when, as parents, you react to that and you get angry or you get mad or you get scolding. You don't have the skills. You haven't learned the skills to be able to kind of take the time and be able to help contain that energy, right? This kid is like, he's been in 4 or 5 different homes, and he's mad at the world, and he's mad at himself, and he doesn't know who he is, and he doesn't know where he belongs. And yes, you say, I love you and I care about you all the time. But when I act out, you may throw out a threat like, well, if you keep doing that, then I'm going to call your social worker, or you're going to be moved. A kid is never going to connect.
Yeah.
And so it's really about, I think the starting point is like what we talked a little bit about earlier is really understanding what these kids have been through, and then being able to be a big enough container to be able to hold that energy that's going to come in and not be reactive, not blame the kid. And then consistent with discipline and, and being able to, hey, this is how we run things, just like we do with our own kids, right? Here's your, having them have some responsibility when you're able to complete your, get your room clean, then you can be on your phone, or then you can play your video game for so much time. When you get your homework done, right? Just sitting down and being with them and supporting them with their homework, helping them to understand those kind of things. It's really kind of a precarious position that foster parents are in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like your own kids, because you can't send your own kids, a 14-day notice.
Right. All right.
You have to work through the hard times. And when you go in with an attitude of, I'm going to work through the hard times with this child that's been placed in my home, and I'm going to work at trying to be able to be a stable environment. And for that child, he's going to test that environment, depending on what his background is. He's going to test that environment for a long time to see if you really do love, if you really do care for me, if you're not just doing it for the money.
Okay, so
Kids know that.
you just said something right now that I've been really wanting to ask, and I didn't know how. So I'm just going to spit it out the best way I can.
Okay, bring it.
All right. You just said, so because they're going to test whether you really do love, but then you stopped yourself and said really do care. And I think when you're saying, being a foster parent is different than being a parent. Someone can think that they're a pretty good parent to their own kids, but of course you've had the time and the natural inclination to love and give your life even, right, for your own kids.
Yep.
And I'm just going to say it out loud that that's not probably how you're going to go into being a foster parent. You might feel like you want to be that person, but that's not realistic, right? You're going into it to do good, but that doesn't come with the territory.
What's
Like
come with
that natural love you have for your own kids, does that just start from jump as a foster parent?
No, but I think that, a lot of times foster parents, right, they're really getting into it because of altruistic things that, in their own heart. I really want to give. I really want to make a difference.
Right.
And they're heroes to me, right? And I love foster parents that get into it, and they're like, this is it. And then it gets in, and I think the reality sets in, is this a different type of parenting?
Yeah.
This is they have different histories, they have different backgrounds. And so that's why I say it's like, it's just like our job, right? So we're at our job, and then when we change and we go to, let's say we take on a new role in our jobs.
Yeah.
What do we get? We get training. We learn different skills to be able then to apply to our new job. That's tougher than our previous job, but typically, somewhat the same, but we rise to the occasion, and we rise our skill level. And it's the same thing with foster kids. It's just not about, I have enough love, right? Your love is going to show up with how you continue to grow in that position.
Yeah.
And the kids are going to benefit. And the kids are going to know that as you're working hard, as opposed to you just have kids coming in and you think they should fit into a mold like your kids. I've raised 3 kids. I know how this goes. Just understand it's not the same.
Yeah.
And being able to work hard at it and be really good at it.
I asked that because I think it's a realistic thought to have. I think kids absolutely know when they're being they're smart, right? I think they can pick up on those things. I think they're very observant, and they remember. They remember the things that they do and what kind of reaction it gets and the response that it gets. So I like the way from my thought process, how you're explaining that, to be realistic about it. Of course, a parent is probably going to feel naturally different about their children that they birthed, than a new child coming into their home. But that doesn't mean that there's not a loving care for the circumstance, for what they want to help with, for what the child's been through. That can be there. And I think what you're saying is the consistent part is not necessarily just saying that, oh, I love you, or, I care about you, but how you behave to show that is how you can make a kid understand that you're really coming from a loving place. And they don't have to compare themselves to your kids, or if you even have kids,
Right.
or your family. It's what they see being given to them and how you
Yeah.
respond when they have these behaviors. I think that's a great way to look at it, for anybody who's thinking about becoming a foster parent. And if there's any kids, who are hearing the way you're describing, I think that's helpful as well.
Well, and we talked a little bit about consistency, and it'd be great if a child got placed into a foster home and they spent their whole tenure in foster care in
Yeah.
one home.
Yeah.
That'd be perfect.
Right.
It doesn't always happen that way. It's seldom happens that way
Yeah.
for various reasons. Sometimes it's the home, sometimes it's the court systems, sometimes they want to reunify siblings, so they'll pull siblings and put them all together in another home. So there's a lot of different motivations. So I always tell parents, and it's heartbreaking for the parents, right? They've invested,
Yeah.
and they truly love this child. They've spent time with them. They've been an advocate for them. They've really, and may have been in the home for a long time, and there's grown an attachment, and then there's a grieving on them when they leave.
Yeah.
And so I often tell parents, I says, you're just a link in the chain of what's going to impact this child. And so you have a lot of opportunities to take advantage of the time that they are in your home by, one, modeling an adult that is able to control their own emotions and control their own behavior, right? Also, foster kids come in and they are able to look at your family and hopefully get a good picture of what a functional family looks like.
Right.
Because most of these kids don't come from functional families and systems, or they would probably be still in their home.
Yeah, exactly.
They get pulled out. And so they get a chance to experience that for a period of time. And they may never, ever see that in another arena, except for they grow up to be an adults. And I remember when I was in Jane and Martin's home and how well it ran and how we just, it was a calm environment. And, and kids remember, right? We have our core memories as children, and they take that and they go, that's how I want to run my family. Yeah. Instead of repeating kind of what a family of origin may have provided for them, they get at least to view and experience something that's healthy, that they may be able to then take and be able to apply it when they become an adult and they have their own families, and at least they have a model or a picture of what that looked like, what that felt like, and be able to strive towards that.
That sounds like a shift in thinking, for anybody who is thinking about being a foster parent. I like the way you described it as being a link in the chain. In a previous conversation, I remember saying you're like a landmark, in this kid's life. You have an opportunity to be. And how do you want them to look back on their time with you?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I really do like the way you said that. There could be a core memory that they go back to, something you thought was small that shapes the way they, raise their own families and how they live. To me, that's a huge shift. I appreciate you bringing that up that way.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you, Mark, for sitting with us. You gave us a lot to think about, a new way to think about it, I think. And I hope that anybody who's thinking about becoming a foster parent can take what you shared. When they make that decision, still go for it. I think they have the heart for it, but to think about the examples you gave, and the way they respond, their behavior, the way they are showing consistency is super important.
Absolutely. And you just work at it.
Yeah.
Right. Be encouraged. I love people, right? I'm in the people business and caring. And so I love it. I just think that foster parents and even relatives that take on children, whether it's grandparents or aunt and uncles, you're their heroes. You're their one chance to possibly have success, to change the child's life in just impactful ways. And it's not easy, and it's something that if you go in with a heart for that and a determination to really work at it and be good at it, your impact could be just unlimited and really be the difference in a child's life.
I couldn't agree more. We've got to work on hero t-shirts, I think.
There you
There's
go.
those folks.
I love
All
that.
right, Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll have to have you back and give us some more good advice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we wrap up, we want to remind you that if you or someone you know is facing a crisis, help is available. You are not alone. If it's an emergency, please call 911. For immediate support, you can reach out to the Crisis and Suicide Hotline by dialing 988. Remember, taking the first step to ask for help is a sign of strength. Stay safe, take care of yourself, and take care of each other. Until next time, be well.
In this episode of Fostering Futures, Athena sits down with Aubrey, service specialist with Desert Mountain Children's Center and a former foster youth. Aubrey shares her powerful journey through foster care, reunification, loss, and early motherhood. This conversation highlights identity, resilience, and the reality of adapting while searching for belonging. An honest and inspiring story of breaking generational cycles and finding your way back to yourself. You don't want to miss it.
See you next time.